So I'm Ritika Kapoor. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist at King's College. I'm the clinical lead and run the endocrine service at King's. And I'm a reader at King's College London. First of all, thank you to Helen and Success to invite me over here and talk about hormones and how it affects behavior. That's my area of interest. So I'm going to start off by just talking about very little about the hypothalamic pituitary axis because Manuela has already done a great job, made my life easier. I will talk about hormones that affect behavior and cognition, the key hormones. The hormone that I'm interested in, which is oxytocin, and the neurohype study, which we are running at King's. A few slides about that as well. So Manuela has already spoken about the hypothalamus. We've heard about the hypothalamic pituitary axis. And just to recap, it's made of lots of little areas or nuclei that we call, which help various features. So we talked about the endocrine function, feeding, satiety, behavior, cognition, temperature regulation, sleep-wake cycle, and all of these different nuclei work in different ways in regulating these areas. And they do so directly by direct connections with the brain through neural circuits and through hormones and through regulation of various neurotransmitters. So there are various processes that are actually working within the hypothalamus, which are quite complex and affect all of these different areas. And so today I am only going to be talking about how hormones affect behavior and cognition and not the other areas. So, hypothalamus, as Melanie also said, affects, sends signals or hormones to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland then sends signals or hormones that affect the end organ, and the end organs release different hormones which affect different parts of the body. As endocrinologists, we are very much interested in growth reproduction, and this is the whole circuit, which is the central regulator of growth and puberty. It also is the axis which acts on, which helps to regulate the water and electrolyte balance. And there are these major hormones which are secreted within the axis. So, oops, this doesn't work. This doesn't, no. How did this? Yeah. So, hypothalamus over here, pituitary gland over here. The pituitary is can be divided into anterior and posterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary has two hormones that we talk about, the oxytocin and ADH or AVP, which regulates fluid and water balance. Now, these are made in the hypothalamus, and they are then stored over here in the pituitary gland and then released from the pituitary gland. You have the anterior pituitary, which releases various hormones. So these are the hypothalamic hormones, release pituitary hormones, and then they work on the various target organs, and these are various effects that you find in the body. I am going to, just going back. All of these hormones, almost all of them, affect behavior and cognition. I'm going to start off with some key hormones. The first one is the CRH-ACTH cortisol axis, or the cortisol the stress hormone that we talk about. And, oops, nope, sorry about that. So cortisol is your stress hormone. It's released when you are when you have stress. So when you have an infection, inflammation, chronic disease, surgery, that's the hormone that goes up, and that helps to respond to stress by increasing blood sugar, increasing blood pressure, increases brain alertness, and that's how you manage stress. However, what we know is that if you have chronic stress, such as in any chronic condition or a brain tumor, then there is chronic elevation of cortisol, which actually leads to impaired emotional processing, anxiety, depression. And if you look at the brain, it's also been shown in imaging studies that there's a reduction in hippocampus and which is the main area which affects learning, memory, emotional processing. We see patients with Cushing's where you have increased cortisol, and these patients have significant decline in verbal memory, emotional processing, and problem-solving abilities. So cortisol is an important hormone, and the way it works in causing behavioral issues and cognitive issues is through the stress response or maladaptive stress response. Then what we know about is the thyroid hormones. So again, the thyroid sits in the neck, is regulated by the hypothalamus and pituitary, and affects various parts of the body. Almost everything in the body it affects, and is generally a hormone that increases alertness. What we know more about thyroid hormones is through congenital hypothyroidism, studies done in children who were born without thyroid hormone, enough thyroid hormone, and this is treated as a medical emergency and it is part of the UK screening program and many countries' screening program, where we try and pick up and identify these patients early on, because we know that congenital hypothyroidism leads to learning difficulties and cognitive issues. So thyroid hormones play a very important role in the maturation and development of the neurons. So if you're born with less thyroid hormone levels, or you develop hypothyroidism later on in life, what we know is that it decreases concentration. You just have slowing down of thought and speech. You have poor memory. And again, imaging studies have shown that there is a reduction in the volume of the hippocampus when you have hypothyroidism. And this all actually reverses when you replace with levothyroxine, which we often see that children or young adults with hypothalamic pituitary disorders quite frequently develop hypothyroidism. The next hormone I'm going to talk about is the growth hormone, IGF-1 axis. Again, as it's a hormone, it's a metabolic hormone. It works in various parts of the body. And the one that we, as endocrinologists, have been most interested in is in the effects of the growth hormone IGF-1 axis on the bone and skeletal muscles, and how it helps growth, as the name suggests. But again, growth hormone has roles in different parts, improving growth and cell proliferation, including the brain. So it helps in neurogenesis. It helps to produce new brain cells. It helps in axonal elongation, myelination. So if you think about an axon as a wire which has a plastic coating, which is the myelin, growth hormone actually helps to stretch the wire. It helps to make this coating, which helps in increasing the electrical activity. So it helps in quick thinking. And synaptogenesis, basically, if you think of synapses as building blocks or bridges, then it improves the communication between cells in the brain. So growth hormone and IGF-1 has a great role in brain health and improving problem-solving abilities, improving how you think. And again, studies looking at isolated growth hormone deficiency has shown defects in how you learn and how you understand the world, basically. And again, the imaging studies have also been supportive in showing that there are changes in the brain, and the volume is lower in brain structures that are important for learning. So these children can have deficits in attention, memory, executive function, and it improves with replacement with growth hormone therapy. There are studies looking at quality of life, way more in adults. There is very limited data in children, but what we've seen is if you have growth hormone deficiency as an adult and it's not replaced, then there is decreased quality of life and psychological well-being. And these they can have decreased energy, vitality, depression, anxiety. All of these mood disturbances are also increased in people with with a growth hormone deficiency. Coming to AVP, which is secreted from the posterior pituitary, we know of it as a hormone that's important for water balance, salt balance, but it's also becoming more and more, or there's more research showing now that it is a hormone that's important again for social bonding, and how it helps in regulation of stress adaptation. So the stress response that I spoke to you about, AVP can actually help, or it modulates how you respond to stress as well. So there are there's some research study which has shown that AVP deficiency can cause or may be implicated in autism spectrum disorder. And there are some studies especially from Stanford, that have shown that giving AVP actually can improve some features of autism and social bonding. This is a systematic review that our group looked at, and we looked at a condition called septo-optic dysplasia. So that's a condition which affects the same part of the brain, the hypothalamus and pituitary, and we were interested to see what has been published in terms of the neurobehavioral impairments in these children. And we found that nearly 35% of children had a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, and nearly 50% of children have some behavioral impairment or emotional dysregulation. Similarly, there's been a systematic review that's been published in looking at neurobehavioral impairments in children with craniopharyngioma, which also affects the same part of the brain. And again, very high prevalence of neurobehavioral, social, and emotional dysfunction in children with childhood craniopharyngioma. And it was quite common to see irritability, impulsivity, aggressiveness, and emotional outbursts. And that brings me to oxytocin, the hormone that we are interested as a team. Now, so this hormone, Melanie will know very well about, probably because of it's known for its role in breastfeeding and labor. But it's recently has been gaining importance as a key factor in modulating social bonding, cognition, social behavior, and memory. And there are lots of studies being done in autism, eating disorders, schizophrenia, so lots of other conditions, but not as much in the conditions that we see as endocrinologists. So what's been shown in some studies is that the levels of oxytocin can correlate with diagnosis and severity of autism. Now, there are lots of challenges in how you measure oxytocin, and that's a different topic by itself. But oxytocin has also been shown to modulate, again, how you respond to stress and anxiety. And it has been, and we know that this axis, or how you react to stress, is affected in children with autism. Oxytocin is also known to regulate appetite and metabolism in various studies. So, there are 2 decades of research in oxytocin from a hormone that's mainly been of interest in labor and breastfeeding. Now it's moving more towards social bonding, behavior, memory, inflammation, and autonomic regulation. So there are various, there's a lot of research on the different aspects that oxytocin can affect. And there are some treatment trials. Again, there are heterogeneous, and I think the heterogeneity is because autism spectrum disorder is such a big bag. And you may have some who have oxytocin deficiency over there, and there are probably others who don't have oxytocin deficiency. And I think as somebody who works in endocrinology, it seems more common sense that our patients who have autism or who are neurodiverse are probably more more likely to have oxytocin deficiency, and if they have features that can be that could probably be attributed to oxytocin deficiency. So targeting oxytocin deficiency is an attractive therapeutic possibility in children with abnormalities of the HB axis, because that's where oxytocin comes from. And we know of its effects in neurobehavioral issues from studies in other conditions. And this is just hot off the press. A beautiful review of the oxytocin system from a group at Harvard, just published last month. We looked at oxytocin system in craniopharyngioma, and we did a systematic review, and we only found 8 studies, but there was some evidence to suggest that patients with craniopharyngioma have a blunted salivary oxytocin response following exercise stimulation, and that was associated with higher anxiety and higher BMI. But the studies are very sparse and do not meet the required standards, and we think that understanding the system in future could be pivotal for exploring the potential role of oxytocin. And the study that we're looking at is actually trying to answer this question: is there a link between the behavioral and cognitive abnormalities that we find and disordered eating in the conditions affecting the hypothalamic pituitary axis? And we are looking at 2 conditions: septoptic dysplasia as a congenital condition and craniopharyngioma as an acquired condition of this, which affects this axis. And the first thing what we're doing is characterizing what are the difficulties that these patients are facing in both the conditions. And it's a multi-center study. We've got King's is the main site, but we've got SLAM, Addenbrooke's, Cambridge, Birmingham, and Marsden, who have also joined us to try and answer these questions. We are assessing the salivary and plasma levels of oxytocin, and then we'll try and look at the associations between the problems that we see in these children and oxytocin levels. So just 1 minute. I only have 2 more slides. Thank you. So just a summary slide of all the different hormones that I've talked about. Cortisol, which is elevated in response to tumor, the brain tumor, and the management and the stress that goes along with it leads to anxiety, depression, can lead to anxiety or depression and emotional instability. Thyroid, very well known, linked to problems with learning. Vasopressin, this been linked to aggression, social deficits, and memory issues. Growth hormone, again linked to cognitive function and neurodevelopment. Prolactin, that I didn't talk about today, but also has been linked to emotional changes and depression and disturbances in sex drive. And finally, oxytocin, that I spoke a lot about. So the hormones from the hypothalamus and pituitary critically influence behavior and cognition. We know now from research that neurobehavioral impairments are common in conditions that affect the hypothalamic pituitary disorders axis, and if we need to recognize them earlier, treat them, and that improves quality of life. That does take away some of the impairments, and we need more multidisciplinary management between endocrinology, psychiatry, psychology, pediatrics, neurology, and hopefully future research that will help uncover some novel therapies. That's it. Thank you.